Hey guys, it's Apple here, and today I'm going to be looking at our Week 2 matchup versus Doesnt. So it was nice to start off the season with a win in Week 1, but Doesnt is definitely one of the more experienced players in our conference, so this really wasn't a matchup we wanted to take lightly. But yeah, let's start off just by jumping into the matchup. So here, Rock Dusk seems like a very good bring here. There is only one rock resist on Doesnt's team, which is Clodsire, and all of Doesnt's faster threats really do not appreciate taking an Accelerock there. And perhaps with a Joyspan set to threaten those faster mons, you can also do some big dents in some of his slower, bulkier mons there as well. So Sandy Shocks also seem pretty valuable in this matchup. The only mon that either resists or is immune to its Thunderbolt or Volt Switch is the Clodsire, which already is putting in overtime to try and deal with the Lycanroc. So having to also deal with the Sandy Shocks, which does also threaten it with the Stab Earth power. Clodsire is going to need to be doing a lot of work to keep those in check if we bring both of those. So Skeledirge also seems like a fairly good bring here. Stops the Dunsparce from being able to do anything there, which is a bit of a low-key mon this gen, I think. It has some very threatening sets. Also means that if Salamence uses Terastallization to turn into a Steel type after using Dragon Dance to stop the Lycanroc Dusk from revenging it with Accelerock, Skeledirge can do a pretty good job of stopping that and either Will-O-Wisping or killing it with Torch Song. Also very nice into Corviknight, which means that we don't necessarily need to bring a Magnezone for the Corviknight because Skeledirge does a good enough job of checking it itself. And then physically bulky it can also help deal with Weavile, because Weavile without knockoff doesn't really threaten the Skeledirge too much just with Night Slash alone. Kind of suffers from losing a lot of its moves this generation. Grafaiai is also a fairly nice bring. Stops things for like Cloyster and Salamence from setting up just with Prankster Encore. Also has Toxic to help put help status some of his bulkier threats like Slowbro and Sylveon. Also being able to switch into Sylveon is quite nice and then get some momentum from that. Jugulis is also a fairly good bring here. The only mon that really resists the Hurricane is Corviknight, and Jugulis can bring Flamethrower or Fire Blast to threaten the Corviknight, so that's nice to bring as well. Barraskewda seems like another decent bring here. Outspeeds all of his mons unless there's any Scarfers, and then Barraskewda has quite luxurious coverage, so we should be able to find a set to be able to threaten everything there. But in any case, let's take a look at what we did put together. So our first mon, sure enough, is Skeledirge. Unaware Will-O-Wisp Slack Off Torch Song is going to be on most Skeledirge sets most weeks. Heavy duty boots for hazards, and then fully physically bulky for things like Salamence and the Weavile to be able to contest them. The 20 base speed is, I suppose, is worth talking about. So Corviknight with 0 speed investment is 170 base speed, well 170 speed as the stat itself. So what can make sense there is for things like Skeledirge or the Magnezone, if it was to come, to speed creep up to 171 base speed to be able to outspeed those. So what you might see quite a lot of experienced players do with experience in draft leagues is they'll know that mons like Skeledirge and Magnezone will want to do that, so they might just put 8 EVs onto the Corviknight to go up to 172 base speed to creep that speed creep. So we took part in the mind game a little bit where we're then speed creeping that speed creep, going up to 173. I have seen some pretty much more aggressive speed creeping in my time where you'll then speed creep this speed creep and so on, but we didn't want to go too deep into it, outspeeding the creep once was fine enough for us. So the 20 EVs wasn't too much of an investment. Let us preserve pretty much the same calculations as we would have with full fizz def. Then Hex was nice just as a fourth move. It's able to hit Slowbro, which makes Slowbro less able to switch in on it for free. Gets doubled base power by Will-O-Wisp as well, so it's just nice to have as a neutral hit. The only thing that isn't being hit by it is the Dunsparce and Weavile and Staraptor. But the Dunsparce doesn't really want to be in versus Skeledirge because it can't really do much to it while it's unaware, and Torch Song will mean that the Skeledirge will outspeed it. Well, not outspeed it, but scale faster than it. And Weavile doesn't particularly threaten the physically bulky set, doesn't want to get Will-O-Wisp, doesn't want to get Torch Songed, so it's not really going to enjoy switching in on a Hex. Barraskewda is just fast enough to outspeed all of his mons without any choice scarfs, 252 attack, and then Expert Belt just to help. So essentially the game plan with Barraskewda here is to press Liquidation. If it gets the defense drop, it gets the defense drop, but then use its coverage to hit things that might want to switch into that. So things like Close Combat for the Dunsparce, Ice Fang for his birds, like Salamence the Raptor. It's also got Throat Chop, which Barraskewda does get Crunch, which in most matchups is better here. Is better, but Throat Chop does have some niche use against things like Sylveon. So if this is a mono attacking Sylveon with just Hyper Voice, then the Barraskewda can press Throat Chop and use that time to press Liquidation, try and get some defense drops and try and muscle through it that way. And then the Grafaiai set is maybe a little bit strange. Max HP to be able to switch into Sylveon a bit better with Black Sludge for a little bit of longevity. Prankster Encore is kind of needed for things like Cloyster and Salamence, just in case they try and set up in front of it. Toxic is nice just to have against some of his bulkier threats like Slowbro and Sylveon. Knockoff is nice just to be able to press and try and get some items, take care of knockoff things like heavy duty boots on maybe the Arcanine or the Corviknight, get rid of leftovers for a bit of additional chip. It's just a nice button to press. Both Toxic and Knockoff have lost a lot of distribution this dex, so it's nice to have a mon that can do both while still preserving some momentum. Which brings me to the U-turn, which might seem strange since Grafaiai does get Prankster Parting Shot. However, we were a little worried of Weavile switching in onto the Prankster Parting Shot, because once Weavile's in, it's very difficult for us to switch into it, especially if the Grafaiai is currently in. So, while Prankster Parting Shot is good in pretty much every scenario where Weavile is not involved, if Weavile does come, it's nice to be able to press U-turn instead. If it does try and switch in on a potential Parting Shot, it can get nailed by a U-turn and take a lot of chip damage, which is just nice to be able to do. Hopefully wear it down, including rocks, where it's not really a threat there. And yeah, 252 ADA was, along with that game plan, just for the biggest U-turns we could get there, and as much damage on the knockoffs. Didn't really need much more invest than that. Extra defense or special defense investment didn't really help many of the calcs that we were looking at. Sandy Shocks, very much just a simple set with both stabs, Volt Switch, Stealth Rocks to be able to get rocks up. Fast enough to outspeed his base 100 speed mons, max special attack, there's not really much more to it. As far as item goes, we were looking at boosting items, things like Magnet, but they didn't really help many of the calcs. It didn't turn any 2-hit into Okos or 3-hit into 2-hit, so the leftovers was nice just for a bit more sustainability. There is worlds where Sandy Shocks would want to take, for example, a Brave Bird from Staraptor or something along those lines, so it was nice to be able to tank those hits and then be able to regain the health over time. Sandy Shocks can be surprisingly bulky sometimes, just by nature of having a Paradox Mon's BST. 85, 97, 85 defenses are not squishy by any means. And Lycanroc, a fairly straightforward set, just a Choice Band Tough Claws. Accelerock, Stone Edge and Close Combat are just their strongest moves there. Stone Edge is only resisted by the Clodsire. Close Combat is its strongest move. Yeah, and then fourth move was just Psychic Fangs to be able to hit the Clodsire. Could have gone Drill Run instead of Psychic Fangs, but Psychic coverage felt like a much safer press versus the team in general, better neutral coverage, and locking a Choice Band into ground coverage versus things like Hawlucha, Salamence, that can be a very bad idea, so Psychic Fangs seemed like a much better bring than Drill Run here. And 252 ADA just for the most stopping power possible with Accelerock. 248 speed with ADA still outspeeds the Arcanine to be able to fire off things like a Close Combat or a Stone Edge, but it gives up outspeeding Salamence and Staraptor by going Adamant, but they are both threatened by the Accelerock, so we didn't feel too bad about losing out on those speed tiers. Jugulus, we wanted heavy duty boots just so it could switch in and out as much as it wanted to if rocks were up. The stabs were very obvious brings. Hurricane is just a very safe press versus his team. Dark Pulse threatens the Slowbro. Flamethrower was nice to be able to hit the Corviknight if Corviknight is switching in on Hurricanes. There was quite a lot of ranges and spreads where Corviknight was going to be switching in on a Hurricane and then it was going to die to a Hurricane and Flamethrower. So, seemed like a sensible coverage move to bring. And then Taunt is just very nice to have versus his slower, bulkier Mons, just as a bit of a stall breaking option there. Speed is much the same as the Sandy Shock spread, enough speed to outspeed his base 100 speed Mons, max special attack, and then just the rest in health. Fairly straightforward. But yeah, let's jump into the game. So, his brings were a little surprising. We were fairly surprised to not see any of his faster offensive threats come, which really shouldn't be too surprising because this is definitely the kind of team that Doesnt is comfortable piloting this brand of kind of bulkier semi-stall with one or two big offensive threats to really break through the opponent's line. So it shouldn't have been too surprising. In any case, we did have the tools to deal with it, we felt. So we weren't threatened by his brings, we were just a bit caught off guard that there was no things like Weavile and Salamence. In any case, with these brings, we were really looking at a Sandy Shock's lead because it has a positive matchup into anything other than perhaps Sylveon. Which, even Sylveon, if it was up against it in the lead, it can just Volt Switch out and get some information as far as what the Sylveon is doing. So I think Doesnt had a fairly similar read to us because, sure enough, while we did lead with the Sandy Shocks, he did lead with the Sylveon to counteract that lead. So yeah, here we just want to Volt Switch out, get a bit of information as far as what the Sylveon is looking to do this game. We're not sure yet if it's perhaps a Choice Spec set or if it is a Wish Protect set. So any kind of information is good here. So we do Volt Switch out, going to Grafire. And this tells us two things. So the Volt Switch calculation there, it's 252 HP, but it's not SPDEF invested. So it's at the very least, it's bulky, but it's not SPDEF. And that Hyper Voice calc didn't seem to be invested either, which means that this is very likely a physically bulky Sylveon here. And then with the leftovers, I thought it was very likely for it to be Wish Protect with Hyper Voice, and then a fourth move. Weren't sure what that fourth move would be just yet, but in any case, it didn't seem too threatening as far as immediate threats. It was just going to be looking to wear us down, which is still threatening. We don't have too many options as far as outright breaking a Sylveon. So we're going to need to look to try and find ways to chip it down to get it in range of things. But here, as far as what we're pressing, we could go for an Encore to force it to press Hyper Voice again, but we think it's much more likely for it to switch out and try and get some more information as far as what our Grafaiai is doing. So here we kind of just want to press knock an item off. Hopefully heavy duty boots, perhaps a leftovers. The worst case scenario with the pressing knockoff here is that Sylveon loses its leftovers, which is still good chip, that's still valuable. So he goes into Corviknight, which reveals he was Shed Shell, preparing for the Magnezone, which makes sense. Does a decent amount of damage as well, the 21%, and get some Black Sludge recovery obviously. That is nice just for information. We know that this Corviknight is definitely not heavy duty boots, and it also doesn't have leftovers, so it's going to be much easier to sustain damage on it if we manage to get rocks up. So here, we just want to try and get some momentum. We want to press U-turn and perhaps get Sandy Shocks back in. Like we said before, threatens everything that's not Sylveon right now, so it's just nice to get the Sandy Shocks in whenever we can. So U-turn, go to Sandy Shocks. He also presses U-turn, and so we're back where we were turn 1 with the Sandy Shocks versus Sylveon. However, this time we have a bit more information. So here, we know that without it being Choice Specs Hyper Voice, we can reasonably comfortably tank a Hyper Voice and manage to get Stealth Rocks up. Exchanges a bit of damage for it, but those Stealth Rocks are going to be worth more than that damage in the long run here. So yeah, here we just want to press Stealth Rocks, take some damage, and then go from there. Most likely Volt Switch out. And yep, we get the Stealth Rocks up, we take some chip, and now the game is about keeping Corviknight pressured so it doesn't get a chance to clear those. There is a chance that it's Hawlucha with Defog as well, but if Corviknight is coming even to the Magnezone matchup, it's likely that it's Corviknight that's carrying Defog. So here we just want to Volt Switch out again, most likely into Grafaiai again. Pretty much the same story as turn 1. So he goes for a Baton Pass. So we do Volt Switch out into Grafaiai, he Baton Passes to Hawlucha, which does suggest that he's most likely Mono Attack Hyper Voice with Wish Protect and the Baton Pass for preserving momentum there. But the Hawlucha is a bit of a strange situation for us here, because he reveals Mold Breaker, which makes sense. It allows it to use Sword Stance to break through Skeledirge by ignoring the Unaware. So there was a lot of ways for us to lose the game here if we didn't immediately stop this Hawlucha. Because if we switch out the Grafaiai and he presses Sword Stance, then we could very well just lose the game on the spot there. There's ways we could muscle through it with Accelerock and Barraskewda, but definitely was not something we wanted to let happen. It definitely hurts us a lot more than we would like. So we kind of want to keep Grafaiai in so that if he does Sword Stance here, we're able to Encore it and stop that setting up. And Grafaiai does have Toxic, which means that even if Hawlucha is going for something like a Substitute, Sword Stance, any kind of setup option, there's still the Toxic preventing it from staying in and getting out of control. It also just allows Grafaiai to stay in when we really want it to be in case there's any setup moves going on. It does mean we're likely to take some damage if Hawlucha does press a damaging move, but unless it's Choice Banded, it's not going to Oko us. And Mold Breaker made it seem like it was much more likely to be a Sword Stance set, which means that Choice Band isn't really going to be an option there. So sure enough, we do get the Toxic on it. It does go for a Brave Bird, which does a lot of damage to us. He has Life Orb, which puts it in very uncomfortable ranges because it can no longer switch into Sylveon without managing to regain some health back. But we do have the Toxic on the Hawlucha, so between Life Orb, Rocks, Toxic and the Brave Bird recoil, it's not going to be doing too much more to threaten our team here. But we do want to try and preserve the Grafai if possible. It does still have Toxic that we want to use on things like Sylveon and Slowbro. And when we switch out to try and preserve the Grafai, he goes for a Swords Dance, which is a very aggressive play. But honestly I think is a very, very good play here. Because it takes a scenario where Hawlucha likely wasn't going to achieve much, where if we go to Skeledirge, Skeledirge can just slack off on a Brave Bird and then he'll back up to full, and then Hawlucha has not really achieved anything while dying, really. But pressing Swords Dance here means that when we go to the Skeledirge on this turn, Hawlucha is now threatening Skeledirge because it's ignoring the Unaware, so it's double attack. It could potentially Terrastallize into a flying and then press Brave Bird and take down the Skeledirge with it. At this point we still wanted to preserve the Skeledirge, so it put us in a position where we either had to give up the Skeledirge or sacrifice another Mon instead. There was going to be another Mon that was coming down with Hawlucha because of the Swords Dance press. So really, despite wanting to preserve the Grafai, at the end of the day it's only 13%, it's not going to be able to switch it on a Sylveon, it's going to be a bit difficult to muscle it back into this game. So we decided that we would just sacrifice the Grafai after all, let it go down with the Hawlucha. And sure enough, it takes another Brave Bird. He doesn't use his Terrastalization, which is good. Well, good for him. It would have been nice for us if he used it, but yeah. Grafai goes down, Hawlucha goes down with it. It's a 1-for-1, that's still okay for us. It's a shame to lose the ability to Toxic things, but it's not too bad. It does also mean that that's Doesnt's faster threats all out the way. It's now just purely bulk, really. So really, our game plan now goes into full stall break. Our win con here is to try and punch holes in this team so that we can maneuver enough space to break through his walls. And that's why we decide to go hard into Barraskewda. So our game plan here is just press Water Terrastalization, press Liquidation. Clodsire is likely unaware for things like Swords Dance, Lycan Rock, so Water Absorb didn't feel too likely to bring. And we felt like we're threatening out Arcanine with Liquidation. So this felt fairly safe to just try and start punching holes and making some space for us. But we completely failed to account for Doesnt's own Terrastalization, and Arcanine turns into a Grass type, which this is just purely down to us not really having the experience yet with the mechanic. It's completely on us, we just didn't consider it as much as we should have done. So Arcanine survives the Liquidation fairly easily, presses Will-O-Wisp, gets a burn on our Barraskewda. So from this Liquidation damage, this wasn't a physically bulky Arcanine, so we were a little confused about the spread there. But then it did also occur to us that it hadn't procced Intimidate. So this was a Flash Fire Grass type Arcanine, which was actually somewhat problematic for our Skeledirge, because now Skeledirge can't hit it with Torch Song and Will-O-Wisp, and we're no longer able to Toxic it because Grafai is dead. So without Will-O-Wisp and without Toxic, Hex isn't really threatening this either. So it's going to become a bit more difficult to try and maneuver around this game, because now anytime Skeledirge is in, potentially that's free time for Arcanine to come in. But in any case, we do expect him to use Morning Sun here, just to try and recover his health. Potentially could have gone for an Ice Fang and fished for a flinch here, but Barraskewda is burned, it's not going to be doing much. Jugulis can fire off Hurricanes, which threaten the Grass type Arcanine, and is just good neutral damage against the rest of his team. Felt like a good opportunity to get that in for free and start just firing off some Hurricanes. So sure enough, we switch in Jugulis, he goes for a Morning Sun. We're just going to press Hurricane here. If he switches in Corviknight, we can threaten with a Flamethrower. At Corviknight's current health, after rocks, Hurricane into Flamethrower will kill. So Hurricane is just a safe press here. Also just threatens the Arcanine. However, Hurricane misses, which, when you're using a 70% accuracy move, you do have to kind of expect this every now and again. But it is still a little frustrating. But here, this does mean that Corviknight does have the space to try and defog or potentially roost up. So Taunt is a fairly comfortable press here just to stop it from doing either of those two things. Sure enough, he goes for the roost. We block the roost, which is nice, means we preserve the damage on this Corviknight. So it's still in range of Hurricane into Flamethrower killing it. So we don't quite want to fire off the Flamethrower just yet. It's not yet in range of dying to the Flamethrower, and we don't want to reveal that we have that. Because once we reveal Flamethrower at that point, if he can predict with the Arcanine, he can annoy us with switches there. Which wouldn't be too great of a play, to be honest. We have rocks up and he doesn't, and Arcanine doesn't really want to be staying in against a potential Hurricane. But yeah, it's still information that we'd rather not give away until we have to. So yeah, we press Hurricane again. It misses again. And he U-turns out into Sylveon. So here, we don't have the Grafairy anymore, which is annoying because that was our primary Sylveon switch in there. We do still have the Skeledirge, which seems like our best switch in here for Sylveon. Once Arcanine is gone, it can start to threaten Sylveon by using Torch Song to stack up boosts enough to be able to threaten it. Doesn't really want to be doing that while Arcanine is still there because Flash Fire exists, just in case it does have something like a Flash Fire boosted Flare Blitz or something like that. But it's also nice to try and get a Will-O-Wisp on this Sylveon just to try and negate the leftovers recovery. Because if we can negate the leftovers and we keep rocks up, then it becomes much easier to preserve the chip on Sylveon, and hopefully we can try and break through it that way. So yeah, we go into Skeledirge, we get crit by the Hyper Voice, which isn't really too relevant, to be honest. And here we just want to press Will-O-Wisp, try and get the burn onto Sylveon. And he reveals that he is in fact the Wish. So here we're predicting the Protect for him to try and get the health back on his Sylveon. So for us this seems like a fairly easy slack off press. And sure enough, although he does go for a Hyper Voice instead of Protect, which is fine here. But here, we expected him, so he could have easily gone out into Arcanine here. But we expected him to stay in and Wish one more time before switching out, just to try and scout for a bit more information and potentially heal things up if it was switching out. Or he'd already revealed the Baton Pass as well, and we were fairly certain that the Sylveon was... Oh, yeah, well, we knew for sure that Sylveon was slower than the Skeledirge. So if it was switching out, Baton Pass as well would have made sense. So Torch Song feels kind of free to press here, get some boosts. Hopefully if we can get a boost or two, then we can maybe threaten the Arcanine, if it does come in to check the Will-O-Wisp and Torch Song. So we do get a Torch Song, we're at +1, new Baton passes into Arcanine. And here we're trying to, so we know it's likely 252 HP, but we don't think it's got physical defense investment. It could have SPDF investment, it could have attack investment. We don't really know yet. So with our +1 from the Torch Song, this is probably the best chance we're going to get for it to be able to 1v1 Arcanine. So we want to fire off a Hex here, just to see how much damage it does to the Arcanine. Try and figure out the sets, figure if there is any way for our Skeledirge to muscle past the Arcanine. So it crunches us, which doesn't do much damage because of our physical bulk. Also means he's not attack invested from what we could tell. but Hex doesn't do much damage back either, even at +1, which is a 65 base power move. It makes sense. But yeah, there was not really going to be any way that Skeledirge was going to be muscling past Hex here. It's going to be burning through our slack-offs just as fast as we can get through the Morning Suns, and Crunch does threaten a defense drop, which unaware doesn't ignore your own stat boosts and debuffs, so Crunch is still threatening for us here. So here we want to slack off once, get back to full health, and then try and get the Jugulus back in on the Crunch. So yep, Crunch, we slack off back up, and again here the plan is just to go hard into Jugulus. Okay, yeah, we tank that pretty easily because of the lack of attack investment there, so here we just get to fire off another Hurricane. Hopefully this one hits. And it does not. So in 6 Hurricane PP we have done 0 damage, which is not good. You do, even with a 70% accuracy move, you would expect to hit one of those 3, but it is what it is. That's just the game we play. So this does mean that it's very likely to die to Flamethrower at this point, but it's a roll, very weighted roll in our favour, but we've been getting unlucky. It's very possible that we don't get the Flamethrower roll. And yep, it lives on 1 health, which if it had been hit by any of those 3 Hurricanes, or if we'd gotten a slightly better roll on Flamethrower, it wouldn't have taken the Siren Head damage. But you can't really be too mad at it. That just happens sometimes in this game. It does make it quite annoying because we now had to reveal the Flamethrower, which, while Corviknight probably isn't going to be switching out because the rocks are up and it's the only way of clearing it and it doesn't have boots, you know, actually thinking about it now, it was really just safe to press Flamethrower again. Yeah, I'm not sure why we decided that we had to press Dark Pulse, but we wanted to press Dark Pulse in case something like Slowbro or Arcanine switched in. But looking back at it now, it doesn't really seem too likely to have happened, but in any case I don't think it particularly matters what we press here as long as it's not Hurricane, because Hurricane has the risk of missing, the other 2 moves don't. So we get the kill onto Corviknight here with the Dark Pulse, and then Sylveon comes in. So here we just want to go back into Skeledirge here and try and get some chip on the Sylveon in any way we can. So we take a Hyper Voice. Here we're looking to just slack off, get up to full health, and then go from there. Yeah, so we slack off. He doesn't go for the Wish, which surprised us a little bit, but we'd already established that this Arcanine was a fairly free switch into the Skeledirge, so this also makes sense. Here at this point, Barraskewda is honestly just an easy sack because it's burned, it's not really threatening anything, it's not going to break through any of these 4 ones that are left. Can perhaps fish for a freeze or a flinch if we're very lucky, but that doesn't seem to be the way that the dice are rolling for us this game. So we just want to get Barraskewda in, get a little bit of chip on this Arcanine, and then use it as a way to get Jugulus in for free. So we take a Crunch, get a defense drop, which means that we're not able to tank a second Crunch. This next Crunch will kill us, but we can just get an Ice Fang off, get a little bit of damage in, and then just get Jugulus in to press Hurricane. And yep, we hit an Ice Fang, which does a reasonable amount of damage there. It dies to the second Crunch, Jugulus comes in, Jugulus gets to press Hurricane. And once again, we miss the Hurricane. And Slowbro comes in, which we could we threaten the Slowbro with the Dark Pulse, but the reason that so with this switching in hard on the Hurricane, rather than something like the Sylveon, makes us suspect that this is potentially a Colbur Berry with perhaps an Ice Beam, So really we wanted to try and scout that possibility, first of all, before just giving up the Jugulus, when the Jugulus is really our best way of killing this Arcanine currently. And so, yeah, there's a little bit of salt in the chat about me using 4 Hurricanes and hitting none of them, but that's what it is. I mean, there is a little bit of justice here as he fires off a Hydro Pump and the Skeletorge dodges the Hydro Pump, which that threw us a little bit. So that made us think this is perhaps a spec Slowbro set or something along those lines, or at the very least special attack invested Slowbro, which did threaten to Oko this Skeletorge, even without choice specs. If it's just 252 modest, it's going to threaten the Skeletorge quite heavily because it is physically defense invested. But then there isn't really anything else that we want to be switching in on a Hydro Pump, and really Skeletorge at this point does seem like our least valuable mon. So our game plan here was just, let's use Hex, we'll get some damage on the Slowbro, we'll sacrifice it to the Hydro Pump, and then hopefully that gives us enough room to be able to maneuver a win with our other 3 mons there. So we get the Hex, it gets a good amount of chip on, which does suggest that this isn't specially defensive. And then with the Hydro Pump kill, most likely is the 252 HP, 252 special attack with modest. But at this point, Sandy Shocks threatens this. The best switch into the Sandy Shocks would be the Grass type Arcanine, but if we use Volt Switch here, we can go straight into Jugulus, preserve the momentum and the chip onto Arcanine, and hopefully try and get us enough room to close out this game, because it's starting to look a little bit sketchy as our mons are getting chipped down. So we do Volt Switch out, we go into Jugulus, it's now at 41%, and really we're, at this point, not going to lie, we were a little bit tilted by all the Hurricane misses, but it's still just the best press here. You can't look at misses and be scared to press the move anymore. So we just have to press Hurricane. If it misses, it misses. But we do finally hit a Hurricane and secure the kill on Arcanine. And so bringing in the Sylveon here, at this point, the Arcanine is gone. Sandy Shocks is once again in a position where it can threaten all of his team as long as the Sylveon doesn't get to Wish up again. So in that case, our one lose con here is for the Sylveon to press Wish. So Jugulus here, it has Taunt. It could try and fire off a move, it could switch out, but Taunt is really just the best way to get damage onto the Sylveon. So we press Taunt, and sure enough he tries to Wish, and with the burn cancelling out the lefties, the rocks, this is just good clean chip on the Sylveon, and this helps us to wear it down. We also still have a full health Lycanroc, which can comfortably take a Hyper Voice, so Sylveon has to either switch out hard into another Pokemon or press Hyper Voice. Either way, Lycanroc is getting in for free, and then compress a Choice Band coverage move, likely Psychic Fangs, because Clodsire has notably been on the bench the entire game, so very clearly this is a set that was brought specifically for the Lycanroc here. So we go into Lycanroc, and we are expecting Doesnt to go hard into Clodsire here. Banded Psychic Fangs does kill the Sylveon at this range as well. It would get punished by him going hard into Slowbro, but him going hard into Slowbro would be fairly risky without seeing what item this Lycanroc was, because if this is a Life Orb Lycanroc, then the game is very likely just over here unless he gets Rocky Helmet chip, and if his Clodsire set is Rocky Helmet, well, is coming for Lycanroc, is very likely Rocky Helmet, because Lycanroc loves its contact moves. So Banded Psychic Fangs felt like a good press here. It was going to get punished by the Slowbro if it did Oko the Clodsire, but we had the tools to break through it between Sandy Shocks and Iron Jugulus. So he does switch in the Clodsire, and while it may seem a little bit unlucky for him to live on 1% yet again, this is actually the best outcome for us, because if we had killed the Clodsire and we were locked into Banded Psychic Fangs, then the Slowbro gets to claim a kill. Most likely we would just sacrifice the Lichen Rock, but in this scenario it means that we get to preserve the Lichen Rock to break through a Slowbro or a Sylveon, and Clodsire can't really do much to the Jugulus, so Jugulus can kind of come in for free again here, finish off the Clodsire, and then either Dark Pulse the Slowbro or taunt the Sylveon to stop the Sylveon from wishing. So this does mean that we can kind of lock in our endgame and start to clean up this, start to clean through his walls after breaking the stall a little bit. Sure enough, he goes for a Toxic. This is kind of annoying. It's probably the best thing he could do against the Jugulus switching in. It means that it can't stay in forever. But we're just going to press Dark Pulse here, claim the kill, and then move on. Sure enough, Sylveon comes in here. So here, same reasoning as before, we just want to press Taunt, stop it from using Wish. He's likely going to Protect, but as long as he's not wishing, then our endgame is preserved. He does Protect, so we're going to die here, and here we go for a little bit of a misplay, because really the best play is to just Taunt again. We thought he was likely to go for a double Protect here, but either way, Taunt should be the press, just again to make sure that he's not using Wish. However, we do go for the Hurricane, I think partly just out of tilt of having missed so many Hurricanes this game. We just wanted at least one to hit, and for Jugulus to get a good clean honest kill with it. And we do get lucky, we don't get punished, and it does crit as well. The crit didn't matter at that range, but it definitely was still a misplay. I think Taunt was still the superior play. But either way, at this point it's just Slowbro left, Sandy Shocks can come in, it threatens to kill with Thunderbolt, it's fairly easy to clean up from here. And we do get the kill with Thunderbolt. So another very close game, very tight knit and very hard fought victory. May have been slightly easier if Hurricane luck was a bit more generous to us, but you can't slap a 70% accuracy move on a moveset and expect it to hit every time. But either way, 2 weeks, 2 wins. Very nice way to start the season, and hopefully that carries on for the rest. But yeah, that was it for this week, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you later.